The wrought iron gates, intricate as a spiderweb yet undeniably formidable, swung inward with a groan that echoed the heavy sigh Eleanor felt rising within her. Beyond them, a long winding drive, meticulously edged with manicured evergreens, led to a mansion that seemed less a home and more a fortress. Stone-faced and sprawling, it loomed against the overcast sky, its windows like vacant eyes staring out at the world it so clearly wished to keep at bay. This was the Kim estate, and Eleanor, her worn but sturdy suitcase clutched in one hand, felt a prickle of apprehension replace her usual calm resolve. Young Ho, stoic and impeccably dressed, met her at the imposing front doors. His gaze was direct, assessing, but held no malice. He merely observed, a silent sentinel of the household. "Miss Vance," he greeted, his voice low and even. "Welcome, Mr. Kim awaits." The interior was a study in austere elegance. Polished marble floors reflected the muted light, walls adorned with abstract art offered no warmth, and the air itself felt thin, meticulously filtered, devoid of the usual sense of a lived-in space. No baking bread, no lingering perfume, no faint whiff of fresh laundry. Just a cool, sterile scent of expensive air freshener and something else. A pervasive emptiness. Mr. Kim, a man whose presence filled the expensive living room even as he remained seated in a high-backed armchair, gestured towards a sofa. His eyes, dark and unreadable, swept over Eleanor, seeming to dissect her with a single glance. He spoke without preamble. "You understand the terms. Discretion is paramount. My son, Min Jun, requires full-time care. He is a challenging infant." There was no tenderness in his voice, only a clipped statement of fact. Eleanor met his gaze steadily. "I understand, Mr. Kim. My priority is always the well-being of the child." Her voice, naturally warm and infused with a lifetime of gaital authority, seemed to ripple through the hushed room, a small, vibrant stone dropped into a still pond. After a brief, almost perfunctory conversation about her duties, Young Ho led Eleanor upstairs. The nursery was at the far end of a long, silent corridor, its door ajar. Inside, the silence was broken only by the whimpering of a baby. The room itself was immaculate, furnished with the finest crib, a plush changing table, and an array of expensive, untouched toys. Yet it felt profoundly unwelcoming. The walls were a pale, almost clinical gray, and the windows, though large, offered only a view of the distant, unchanging landscape. No cheerful mobiles spun above the crib. No soft rugs invited barefoot play. It was a room designed for a baby, but not for a child. Minjun, a tiny bundle in the vast crib, was red-faced and trembling, his cries thin and reedy. He thrashed his small limbs, his face contorted in distress. Eleanor's heart, which had been tightening with each step through the mansion, now ached with an immediate, profound empathy. This wasn't a challenging infant. This was a profoundly lonely one. She approached the crib slowly, her movements deliberate and calming. Young Ho stood by the door, his posture rigid, observing her every move. Eleanor, however, had eyes only for the baby. She hummed a soft, wordless tune as she reached in, her hands gentle as she scooped the tiny boy into her arms. Minjun stiffened initially, his cries intensifying, but as Eleanor held him close, rocking him gently, a lifetime of experience guided her. She had held countless babies, each one a universe of needs and emotions, and she knew the language of touch, of rhythm, of unvarnished love. "Shh, little one," she murmured, her voice a warm balm. "It's all right. Nana's here now." She swayed, a slow, comforting dance, her cheek resting against his soft hair. The faint scent of baby powder, the only hint of a child in this sterile environment, was almost swallowed by the vastness of the room. Her mind drifted back, not to the imposing gates or the silent halls, but to another time, another child. Little Maya, with her infectious giggle and mischievous eyes, had been barely 3 months old when Eleanor had taken her on. Maya's mother, a young widow struggling with 2 jobs, had needed Eleanor's steady hands and boundless patience. Eleanor remembered the tiny, sun-drenched nursery in their cramped apartment, painted a cheerful buttercup yellow, filled with the scent of warm milk and the sound of Maya's gurgles. She had spent hours there, singing lullabies, reading stories, teaching Maya to clap her hands. That home, though modest, had overflowed with a vibrant, messy, beautiful life. And then there was young David, a boisterous boy who at 5 had still insisted on being rocked to sleep. Eleanor, with her strong, loving arms, had always obliged, her stories weaving dreams of faraway lands. His parents, both busy professionals, had relied on Eleanor not just for childcare, but for the very soul of their home. She had been the anchor, the heart that kept their family tethered. Here, with Minjun, the landscape was starkly different. This child was not merely a challenging infant, he was an echo in a void. His small body vibrated with unspoken anxieties, a desperate longing for connection that he hadn't yet learned to articulate, only to cry. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Minjun's cries began to subside. He burrowed his face into Eleanor's shoulder, his tiny hand clenching a handful of her blouse. The furious trembling ceased, replaced by a softer shudder. He still whimpered occasionally, a tiny, exhausted sound, but the raw anguish had begun to recede. Young Ho, still at the doorway, watched. His expression remained unreadable, but Eleanor felt the subtle shift in the air, a release of the tension that had held him so rigidly. He had seen the child's distress, undoubtedly many times, and perhaps, though he would never show it, felt its weight. He needs warmth, Eleanor stated softly, her gaze still fixed on the now calmer Minjun. Not just blankets, but presence, connection. She looked up, her eyes meeting young Ho's across the expanse of the barren nursery. He needs to feel safe. Young Ho merely nodded once, a barely perceptible movement, but in that small gesture, Eleanor sensed a flicker of understanding, a quiet acknowledgement of the truth she had spoken. The vast cold mansion might keep the world out, but it also kept warmth in, or in Minjun's case, out of reach. Eleanor knew, with a certainty born of experience, that her work here would be far more than just childcare. It would be about filling an emptiness, one small loving gesture at a time. The iron gates had closed behind her, but now a different kind of gate, an emotional one, lay before her, waiting to be opened. A cry in the silence, Minjun's initial calm was a fragile truce, shattered as days bled into a week. His disposition, initially labeled challenging, now revealed its true, relentless nature. Sharp, demanding cries sliced through the mansion's meticulous quiet, each wail a shard of glass. They began as fragile whimpers, quickly escalating into a full-throated shriek that reverberated through marble halls, a constant abrasive presence that seemed to resonate in Eleanor's very bones. Previous nannies, she'd gleaned from hushed staff whispers, had averaged 2 weeks. One, a stern woman obsessed with rigid schedules, had fled after a particularly grueling night, muttering about quote one and quote two. Another, younger and seemingly more pliant, simply vanished one morning, leaving a hastily scrawled apology. Eleanor understood completely. Minjun's cries weren't mere infant demands. They were a profound lament, a raw expression of deep-seated unhappiness that seemed to emanate from the very fabric of the house itself. Eleanor deployed every trick from her decades of experience. She sang soft spirituals, her alto voice a soothing balm in the vast nursery. She rocked him, a slow, steady rhythm, humming ancient folk songs passed down through generations. She walked him through the sterile, immaculate rooms, narrating imagined adventures around muted tapestries and silent, imposing portraits. Even the old warm bath trick, the gentle lapping of water a momentary distraction, ultimately failed, the wailing resuming louder, more insistent than before. The mansion offered no solace. Its grandeur felt cold, almost antagonistic. Polished surfaces reflected light, but seemed to absorb all warmth. The air, conditioned to precise temperatures, felt thin, devoid of the comforting sense of home-cooked meals or blooming flowers. Even the light, filtered through heavy drapes, possessed a muted, almost funereal quality. Laughter was absent, casual conversation non-existent. Only the hum of the ventilation system and the distant muffled sounds of staff fulfilling their duties punctuated the silence. It was a place designed for function, for power, but utterly devoid of joy. Eleanor often observed young Ho. He moved like a shadow, a constant watchful sentinel. His perpetually veiled eyes seemed to absorb everything, missing nothing. She noticed the subtle tightening of his jaw when Minjun's cries intensified, the almost imperceptible clenching of his hands. A palpable tension radiated from him, suggesting deeply ingrained responsibility, perhaps even a shared burden. He offered no advice, no intervention, yet his presence was a silent acknowledgement of the struggle. One evening, as twilight bled into a moonless night, Minjun's distress surged to an unprecedented peak. He woke from a fitful sleep with a gasping sob that quickly spiraled into a relentless shriek. Eleanor had fed him, changed him, checked his temperature. Nothing appeased the torment within him. Tiny fists pummeled the air, his face contorted into a mask of inconsolable grief. Eleanor held him close, pacing the nursery, her own weariness a dull ache. The mansion lay utterly silent save for Minjun's piercing cries. Even the usual distant hum of ventilation seemed to recede, leaving only the raw sound of infant sorrow. She pressed her cheek to his soft head, feeling the warmth of his feverish skin against hers, her heart aching with profound helplessness. "What is it, little one?" she whispered, her voice rough with fatigue. "What troubles you so deeply?" His only answer was another heart-wrenching sob, a sound that seemed to strip away the mansion's elegant veneer, exposing its hollow core. Eleanor knew, with a certainty that transcended logic, that Minjun wasn't merely crying for a bottle or the dry diaper. He was crying for something far more fundamental, something utterly absent from this gilded cage. He was crying for connection, for warmth, for the very essence of human comfort that this house seemed determined to deny him. And in the echo of his solitary cries, Eleanor felt a chilling premonition, a sense that this wasn't just about a baby and his nanny, but about something much larger, something deeply broken within the silent walls of the Kim estate, the echo of a forgotten melody. The moon, a sliver of bone against the bruised violet sky, offered little solace. Inside Minjun's nursery, a single nightlight cast an anemic glow, doing little to dispel the oppressive gloom that clung to the heavy drapes. Eleanor, her shoulders aching with a familiar tension, paced the plush carpet. Minjun, a small red-faced bundle in her arms, wailed with an intensity that seemed to vibrate through the very floorboards. It wasn't a cry of hunger or discomfort. It was a guttural, primal sound, an echo of profound loneliness that had become her constant companion in the past weeks. She had tried everything: warm milk, gentle rocking, soft murmurs, even the hushed recitation of nursery rhymes she'd learned in her youth. Each attempt was met with renewed vigor, a fresh wave of inconsolable grief from the infant. His small fists beat a rhythmic, frantic tattoo against her chest, and his body stiffened and arched in protest. The air grew heavy with his distress, a palpable weight that pressed down on Eleanor, threatening to crush her resolve. The mansion's silence, usually so profound, seemed to amplify his cries, turning them into piercing shards that pricked at her frayed nerves. A knot tightened in her stomach. This wasn't just a baby needing comfort. This was a tiny soul screaming into a void. She felt the insidious tendrils of doubt begin to creep in, whispering that perhaps she too was insufficient, unable to reach him. Had all the others given up for a reason? Was there a coldness in this house that even her decades of warmth couldn't penetrate? Her own eyelids felt gritty, sleep a distant memory. The faint scent of expensive fabric softener on his blanket, mingling with the sharp tang of his tears, was almost suffocating. She swayed, a ghost of a memory stirring within her. It was a fragment, barely a wisp, from a time long past, from a world away. A different house, different children, a different language. It was a melody, gentle and lilting, that she hadn't consciously thought of in decades. It had been sung to her by her mother, who had learned it from a friend from far across the ocean, a friend who had shared tales of a vibrant, complex land. The words, if she'd ever known them clearly, were gone, dissolved by the relentless march of time. Yet the tune, an intricate dance of rising and falling notes, remained etched somewhere deep in the labyrinth of her mind. Without conscious thought, as if possessed by an instinct older than memory, Eleanor's lips parted. A soft, humming sound, breathy and hesitant at first, emerged. It was a low, undulating drone, a melody spun from forgotten threads. It was slow, tender, almost melancholic, yet imbued with a profound sense of peace. The tune unfurled itself, a delicate ribbon of sound unspooling into the tension-filled nursery. Minjun's cries, which had been reaching a fever pitch, faltered. His small, rigid body seemed to soften almost imperceptibly in her arms. His frantic movements stilled. Eleanor, her eyes still clouded with exhaustion, watched him, barely daring to breathe. She continued to hum, the melody growing a little stronger now, flowing with a natural rhythm, as if it had always resided on her tongue, waiting for this moment. His head, heavy with sleepiness, nestled closer into her shoulder. His eyelids, red and swollen from crying, began to flutter. A tiny, hitching breath escaped him, and then another, deeper and more even. The tension that had held his small frame captive seemed to drain away, replaced by a profound, almost startling stillness. The wail that had filled the room moments before was replaced by the gentle hush of the lullaby. Eleanor walked slowly, carefully, her voice a soft current in the room until she reached the crib. As she lowered him, Minjun's eyes, heavy-lidded and distant, met hers for a fleeting second. There was no terror in them now, no anguish, only a quiet surrender. The humming continued, a silken thread connecting them. His fingers, previously clenched in tight fists, uncurled, his tiny hand resting open on the soft blanket. She watched, mesmerized, as his breathing deepened, his chest rising and falling with the steady rhythm of true sleep. A sigh, soft as a butterfly's wing, escaped his lips. The last faint echo of the lullaby hung in the air, a whisper of comfort that had finally found its way home. Eleanor stood there for a long moment, the silence of the nursery now a balm rather than a burden. A profound weariness settled over her, but beneath it a tiny spark of hope flickered, warm and persistent. The barrier between them, so formidable just moments ago, had yielded to a forgotten melody. The matriarch's demand. Sunlight, pale and hesitant, filtered through the mansion's tall windows, casting long dancing shadows across the polished marble floor. The house, usually a symphony of hushed movements and muted conversations by this hour, was unnaturally still. The silence, however, was not peaceful. It hummed with an almost audible tension, a lingering echo of the night's emotional storm. Eleanor, having managed a few hours of fitful sleep, was carefully preparing Minjun's morning bottle in the sun-drenched, gleaming kitchen. The gentle gurgle of water heating was the only sound. Minjun, nestled securely in a high chair at the kitchen island, watched her with wide, unblinking eyes, a quiet curiosity replacing his usual morning fretfulness. The remnants of his profound desolation from the previous night seemed to have receded, leaving behind a fragile, almost serene calm. A sudden sharp rap on the kitchen door frame shattered the quiet. Eleanor turned, the bottle clutched in her hand, to find Mrs. Kim standing there. The matriarch was an imposing figure, even more so against the bright morning light, which seemed to flatten her feature into an unreadable mask. Her traditional silk hanbok, a deep sapphire blue, shimmered faintly, its intricate embroidery catching the light like frozen dew. Her silver hair, pulled back into a severe bun, gleamed. Her eyes, usually dark pools of inscrutable assessment, now held an unfamiliar intensity, a glint that Eleanor couldn't quite decipher. Young Ho, a silent sentinel as always, stood a respectful 2 paces behind her, his gaze fixed on Minjun, a barely perceptible tremor in his jaw. The shared relief from the night before was now replaced by a renewed, palpable apprehension. "What was it you sang last night?" Mrs. Kim's voice, though low, cut through the air with the precision of a scalpel. It wasn't a question so much as a demand, a direct challenge that bypassed pleasantries entirely. Eleanor felt a prickle of unease, a cold knot forming in her stomach. The calm she'd cultivated quickly began to fray. She straightened, her hand instinctively moving to smooth the apron tied around her waist. "Good morning, Mrs. Kim. Minjun was quite distressed last night. I simply hummed a lullaby I remembered." She kept her voice steady, attempting to project an air of calm confidence she didn't quite feel. The intensity emanating from Mrs. Kim was almost a physical force pressing down on her. Mrs. Kim took a slow, deliberate step into the kitchen, her eyes never leaving Eleanor's face. A lullaby. What lullaby? Each word was weighted, imbued with an urgency that belied the simple nature of her query. There was no softening in her gaze, no hint of the typical morning civilities. Eleanor swallowed, her throat suddenly dry. I don't recall its name. Ma'am, it was just a melody, one I heard many years ago. She tried to sound vague, hoping to deflect the matriarch's relentless focus. Her mind raced, sifting through the vague memories of the tune, its haunting, melancholic notes. It felt deeply personal, almost sacred, and sharing it felt like a violation of an unspoken trust. Heard? Mrs. Kim's voice sharpened, a sliver of ice in the morning air. Where? From whom? Her eyes narrowed, searching Eleanor's face as if seeking hidden answers in the lines around her eyes, the set of her jaw. Young Ho shifted imperceptibly, his eyes darting between the two women, a silent witness to the escalating tension. It was a long time ago, Eleanor repeated, feeling a flush creep up her neck. Her calm demeanor, usually her shield, was being tested. The matriarch's unyielding scrutiny felt like an interrogation, not a casual inquiry. I truly don't remember the specifics. It was a tune that simply came to me. It seemed to soothe Minjun. She gestured faintly towards the baby, who, oblivious to the charged atmosphere, was now gently gumming a colorful plastic ring. Mrs. Kim took another step closer, her presence filling the already large kitchen. The scent of her expensive perfume, a delicate floral, was suddenly overpowering. A tune that came to you, she echoed, her voice laced with skepticism. A tune that no one in this house, no one in my family has heard in decades suddenly came to you? There was an accusation in her tone, a hint of something deeper, darker, that Eleanor couldn't yet grasp. Her brow furrowed, a deep line appearing between her formidable eyes. The intensity of her emotion was becoming increasingly apparent, chipping away at her stoic facade. A faint tremor ran through her gloved hands, clutched tightly in front of her. Eleanor met her gaze directly, despite the tremor of fear now running through her. I understand this may sound unusual, Mrs. Kim, but I can only tell you what I know. It was a melody that resonated with Minjun. It's all I can say. She held her ground, refusing to be cowed, even as the matriarch's unwavering stare felt like a physical weight pressing against her. The air crackled with unspoken questions, with a burgeoning significance that transcended a simple lullaby. Young Ho's breath hitched almost imperceptibly, his gaze fixed on Mrs. Kim's face, a silent plea for her to temper her intensity. The matriarch, however, seemed beyond such considerations, her focus entirely consumed by the enigma of the song, a song of shattered memories. The silence that followed Mrs. Kim's interrogation was thick, charged with an unspoken demand. Eleanor felt the weight of it, the expectation pressing down on her. Minjun, thankfully, remained asleep in the crib, oblivious to the strange tension that had seized the kitchen. Taking a fortifying breath, Eleanor met Mrs. Kim's unyielding gaze. It's just a little tune I picked up, ma'am, she began, her voice steady despite the tremor in her stomach. I don't know where it came from exactly, but it just felt right for Minjun. Mrs. Kim's eyes narrowed, her lips a thin, disapproving line. Right? What does right mean, Miss Vance? I asked you a question. Where did you learn that melody? Her voice was low, each word meticulously articulated, yet it vibrated with an intensity that belied its quiet delivery. Eleanor shifted her weight, suddenly acutely aware of the warmth of the bottle in her hand. This wasn't just curiosity. It was something far deeper, far more unsettling. I can't tell you where I learned it, Mrs. Kim, she admitted, her voice softer now. It just came to me. A memory, perhaps, from long ago. She paused, considering. Sometimes when I'm with Minjun, the music just flows. She looked down at her hands, then back up at Mrs. Kim, a gentle resolve hardening her expression. If you want to hear it, I can sing it for you. Maybe that will help. A flicker of something unreadable crossed Mrs. Kim's face. Surprise, perhaps, or a flash of something akin to vulnerability, quickly masked. She merely nodded, a curt, almost imperceptible movement. Her posture remained rigid, arms crossed, as if bracing for an impact. Eleanor closed her eyes for a moment, letting the melody well up from within her, a quiet, soothing river. When she opened them, her gaze was fixed on some distant point, her focus entirely on the sound. She began to hum, the notes soft and ethereal at first, then blossoming into the full, gentle melody she had sung to Minjun. Her voice, a rich alto, carried the tune with an innate grace, each phrase imbued with a profound tenderness. It was a simple lullaby, yet within its delicate structure lay a complex tapestry of comfort and longing, a wordless story of solace. As Eleanor sang, the formidable composure that usually encased Mrs. Kim began to crack. The rigid shoulders softened almost imperceptibly. Her sharp gaze, initially fixed on Eleanor's face, drifted, becoming unfocused, distant. A tremor passed through her body, so slight Eleanor almost missed it. Then a single tear, bright and startling, traced a path down Mrs. Kim's perfectly smooth cheek, reflecting the soft kitchen light. It seemed to break something within her. The song continued, weaving its gentle spell. And with each rising and falling note, Mrs. Kim's control disintegrated further. Her breath hitched, her hand, previously a tight fist, now trembled, rising slowly to cover her mouth. A choked sob escaped, a raw, ragged sound that tore through the quiet kitchen. Eleanor faltered, her voice wavering, but the sheer force of the emotion emanating from Mrs. Kim compelled her to continue, to offer the soothing balm of the music. Then, with a sudden, heart wrenching sound, Mrs. Kim's knees buckled. She didn't fall so much as collapse, sinking to the polished wooden floor, her silk robe rustling softly around her. Her head bowed, strands of dark hair falling across her face as she clutched her chest, her body racked with shuddering sobs. The elegant, impenetrable matriarch was gone, replaced by a weeping, broken figure. Eleanor stopped singing, the final notes of the lullaby lingering in the air, a melancholic echo. She stood rooted to the spot, unsure how to react. The transformation was so complete, so violent, it left her speechless. She bent down, her hand hovering, unsure whether to offer comfort or give the woman space. My my sister, Mrs. Kim gasped, her voice thick with tears, barely audible. That song, it was hers. Only hers. She lifted her head slightly, her eyes bloodshot, haunted. It's a lullaby from our family, passed down generations. Her words were fragmented, broken by gasps and sobs, like shattered pieces of a fragile memory. No one outside our family, no one should know it. Her gaze, though tear-filled, held a renewed intensity, a desperate question. Where, where did you hear it? Tell me, my sister. She sang it to me. The last words were a whisper, laden with an unbearable grief, as if uttering them caused her physical pain. Oh, Hannah, my sweet Hannah. The name hung in the air, a ghost in the elegant kitchen. Eleanor knelt beside her, a profound empathy washing over her. The mystery of the lullaby had just deepened into something far more personal, far more tragic than she could have ever imagined. It wasn't just a song, it was a key, unlocking a vault of ancient sorrow, a song of shattered memories. Sora's ghost. Eleanor knelt beside Mrs. Kim, a comforting hand resting on the trembling shoulder. The grand foyer, usually so imposing, now felt like a stage for a profound, private agony. Mrs. Kim's sobs were raw, stripped bare of all pretense. Hannah, my Hannah, she choked out, the name a ragged whisper. Hannah. The name resonated deep within Eleanor, stirring a distant, half-forgotten memory. The lullaby, now imbued with such potent sorrow, twisted something in her own chest. She closed her eyes and a vivid image sprang to life. A sun-drenched afternoon, decades past. Two young girls, perched on a worn wooden bench in a small overgrown garden behind a modest house. One girl, with eyes like liquid midnight and a mischievous smile, hummed the very melody Eleanor had just sung. Sora, Eleanor murmured, the name escaping her lips before she could catch it. My friend, Sora, she taught it to me. Mrs. Kim's head snapped up, her tear-streaked face etched with a fresh wave of disbelief. Sora, she repeated, her voice hoarse. No, that's not possible. My sister's name was Hannah. Her nickname, her true name, given by our grandmother, was Sora. It means sky. A cold dread began to coil in Eleanor's stomach. Sora, Hannah, the same girl. The girl who had vanished from Eleanor's life as suddenly and completely as a wisp of smoke, leaving behind only the ghost of a lullaby and a gaping hole in a young girl's heart. She was my best friend, Eleanor explained, her voice hushed. We lived next door to each other for a few years when I was a child. She taught me that song, said her grandmother taught it to her, and it was a secret family song. Then she was gone. Her family moved without a word. I never saw her again. Mrs. Kim's gaze, though still clouded by grief, sharpened with an intensity Eleanor hadn't seen before. It was no move, Mrs. Vance, she stated, her voice regaining a fraction of its former steel, though it was now laced with an unbearable sadness. She fled. She ran away from a forced marriage. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Eleanor remembered Sora's quiet distress in the weeks before her disappearance, the way her laughter had faded, replaced by a haunting melancholy. She'd attributed it to a child's anxieties, never imagining such a cruel reality. A forced marriage? Eleanor asked, her own voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Kim nodded, her eyes fixed on some invisible point in the distance, as if replaying the painful scene in her mind. Our family? It was an old, respected lineage, but our fortunes had dwindled. My father, desperate to restore our standing, arranged for Hannah, Sora, to marry into a powerful family, a family with immense influence, but also a fearsome reputation. The temperature in the foyer seemed to drop several degrees. Eleanor's breath hitched. She remembered hushed whispers among the adults in her childhood neighborhood, rumors about the family Sora was betrothed to, a family shrouded in an aura of fear and unspoken power. She refused, Mrs. Kim continued, a bitter pride in her voice. She was spirited, my Sora. She wouldn't be a pawn. On the night before the ceremony, she vanished. We searched, of course, for weeks, for months. My father was beside himself with shame and rage. He disowned her, declared her dead. But I knew she was alive somewhere, just trying to carve out a life free from that gilded cage. Eleanor's mind raced, piecing together fragments of memory, old gossip, and the unsettling atmosphere of the Kim estate. The opulence, the veiled power, the way Mr. Kim carried himself with an almost regal authority that bordered on menace. The family she was meant to marry into, Eleanor began, her voice trailing off, a terrible premonition taking root. Mrs. Kim finally met Eleanor's gaze, her eyes now burning with a raw, undeniable pain and a profound, devastating irony. The family? Mrs. Vance, she finished, the words like shattered glass, was the Kim family. The very family my husband, Minjun's father, now leads. A gasp caught in Eleanor's throat. The air thinned, making it hard to breathe, the intricate patterns on the ceiling, the polished marble floors, the hushed elegance of the house, it all coalesced into a suffocating cage. Sora, her vibrant, laughing friend, had fled this very world, only for Eleanor to unwittingly bring her spirit back through a lullaby into the heart of the family she had so desperately escaped. Minjun, the innocent infant, was a grandson of the very lineage Sora had defied. The layers of tragedy, betrayal, and coincidence were so profound, Eleanor felt a dizzying sensation, as if the ground beneath her feet had suddenly shifted. The lullaby wasn't just a memory, it was a key, unlocking a Pandora's box of generations-old secrets and heart-wrenching truth. The web of lies unraveled. The lullaby, a fragile thread woven through years of silence, now snapped taut, pulling Eleanor through a labyrinth of forgotten faces and whispered names. Sora, her childhood friend, Mrs. Kim's sister, the runaway bride, and now Minjun, the baby she was rocking, the baby whose loneliness had resonated so deeply with her own, was the grandson of the woman who had taught her that very song. A cold dread spread through Eleanor, a sickening twist in her stomach. If Sora, Mrs. Kim's sister, had fled a forced marriage to the Kim family, and if Minjun was Sora's grandson, then who was Minjun's father? Her gaze, sharp and unwavering, found Mrs. Kim's tear-streaked face. The pieces, once scattered and seemingly unrelated, began to click into place with terrifying precision. The Kim family, Mr. Kim. He was the son of Sora, the woman who had defied this very lineage. He was Mrs. Kim's nephew. The air in the grand drawing room, already thick with unspoken grief, seemed to crackle with this new, unbearable truth. Eleanor's breath hitched. She looked down at Minjun, his small hand still clutching her finger, his eyes so like his father's, now peaceful. He was a symbol, a living testament to a love story brutally interrupted, a lineage deliberately obscured. Mrs. Kim, her sobs now ragged gasps, watched Eleanor's face, seeing the comprehension dawn in her eyes. The older woman's shoulders shook violently. Quote 5, she choked out, her voice barely a whisper, ragged with decades of unspoken regret. Quote 6. Her eyes, swollen and red-rimmed, pleaded for understanding. Quote 7. Eleanor felt a wave of profound sorrow wash over her, not just for Sora, but for the entire family caught in this intricate, heartbreaking snare. The weight of Mrs. Kim's regret was palpable, a suffocating shroud. Eleanor remembered the initial coldness, the rigid expectations, the silent judgment that had permeated the mansion upon her arrival. It wasn't malice, she now understood. It was the impenetrable armor of grief and shame, a desperate attempt to maintain order in a world shattered by a secret. Minjun stirred in Eleanor's arms, his small body a warm anchor in the storm of revelations. She tightened her embrace, a fierce protectiveness rising within her. This child, innocent of the sins and sorrows of his elders, deserved peace. The silence that followed Mrs. Kim's confession was deafening, punctuated only by the distant chime of a grandfather clock in the hall and the soft rustle of Mrs. Kim's silk robe as she sagged into a nearby armchair. The opulent room, usually a testament to the family's power and prestige, now felt like a mausoleum of buried truths. The heavy velvet drapes seemed to absorb all sound, leaving only the raw, exposed emotions. Eleanor remained standing, Minjun nestled against her chest, her mind reeling. The forced marriage, the defiance, the secret child, the decades of searching for a sister believed dead, only to discover her son was the family's heir, living under a veil of manufactured identity. It was a tragedy of Shakespearean proportions, played out in the hushed elegance of a modern Korean mansion. Mr. Kim, he doesn't know, Eleanor finally asked, her voice hushed, careful. Mrs. Kim shook her head, tears streaming anew. No, my father fabricated a story, said his mother died in childbirth, a distant relative. We were told to never speak of Sora again. It was a different time, Eleanor. Honor, reputation, it meant everything. Her gaze flickered to Minjun, a profound sadness etching itself into her face. He's lived his whole life believing a lie, believing he had no mother. And now Minjun. He's Sora's grandson, my sister's grandson. The gravity of the situation settled over Eleanor like a physical weight. Mr. Kim, the powerful, often unreadable man who owned this empire, was about to discover his entire life was built on a foundation of deceit. His distant, often severe demeanor now made a terrible kind of sense. He had carried the unspoken burden of a missing mother, a hole in his identity that no wealth or power could fill. The shift in the household dynamics was immediate, if subtle. The air, once tight with unspoken tension and a certain formal distance, now felt charged with a different kind of energy, one of fragile hope, but also immense trepidation. The servants, ever observant, moved with a newfound quietness, sensing the seismic shift that had occurred. Mrs. Kim, usually composed and commanding, now walked with a slight stoop, her eyes often distant, lost in thought. She would often pause by Minjun's crib, her hand hovering over his sleeping form, a profound aching tenderness replacing her previous reserved affection. Eleanor, still holding Minjun, felt a deep resolve solidify within her. She was no longer just a nanny. She was a silent guardian of a devastating secret, a bridge between two generations fractured by a lie. The lullaby, once a simple melody, was now a sacred trust. It was the key not just to Mindren's heart, but to the unraveling of an entire family's painful past. The web of lies had been unraveled, but the consequences, Eleanor knew, were only just beginning to unfold. A bridge of maternal wisdom. The confession hung in the air, a shroud woven from decades of deceit. Mrs. Kim, now a crumpled figure on the settee, wept into her hands, her sobs echoing the shattered fragments of her family's past. Eleanor, her own heart heavy, knelt beside her, a steadying hand on her trembling shoulder. "It's all right, Mrs. Kim." Eleanor's voice was a soft murmur, a balm to the raw wounds. "Let it out. This pain, it's been buried too long." "Mrs." Kim looked up, her eyes swollen and red-rimmed, a testament to a lifetime of silent suffering. "How can it be all right, Eleanor? My brother, my own son. I've lived a lie. My father. He destroyed us all." The words were choked, each one laced with bitter regret and self-recrimination. Eleanor squeezed her shoulder gently. "Your father made choices born of his own pain and fear, Mrs. Kim. But you carried the weight of it. You protected a secret that wasn't yours to keep. Now it's time to choose healing." Eleanor's gaze, though gentle, held an unwavering resolve. She understood that sometimes breaking down was the first step to rebuilding. She knew the power of a mother's instinct and how that wisdom could extend beyond blood ties. "How do I even begin?" Mrs. Kim whispered, despair etched on her features. "How do I tell him? How do I look at my son and tell him his whole life is a fabrication?" "With truth, Mrs. Kim," Eleanor said simply, her voice firm but not harsh. "And with love. It will be painful, yes. But the truth, no matter how hard, is a foundation. Lies are quicksand. And he deserves the truth just as you deserve the peace that comes with finally speaking it." Eleanor's words were not a judgment, but a compassionate directive, a guiding hand leading Mrs. Kim through the emotional labyrinth. A sudden sharp cough from the doorway announced Mr. Kim's presence. He stood stiffly, his face a mask of controlled fury and disbelief. His eyes, usually sharp and assessing, were now clouded with a volatile mix of confusion and indignation. He had clearly overheard some, if not all, of the conversation. "What is this nonsense?" Mr. Kim's voice was tight, each word clipped. He refused to look directly at his mother, his gaze fixed somewhere beyond Eleanor, as if trying to mentally erase the scene before him. "What truth are you speaking of, Eleanor? My mother is dead. My father raised me. This this is a cruel fabrication." His tone was accusatory, his defensiveness a palpable shield. Eleanor rose slowly, meeting his gaze directly. Her posture was calm, her expression unyielding yet compassionate. She knew this was the hardest part, the moment of direct confrontation. "Mr. Kim," she began, her voice steady, "your mother is not dead. Her name was Hannah, but to me she was Sora, my childhood friend, and she loved you very much, even if she couldn't be with you." Mr. Kim's jaw tightened. "You speak of things you know nothing about. You are a caregiver, Eleanor, not a family historian. This is an intrusion." His words were meant to dismiss, to diminish, but Eleanor held her ground. "I speak of a truth that has been waiting to be told, Mr. Kim," she countered, her voice resonating with an authority that surprised even her. "A truth that has shaped your life, your mother's life, and your mother's sister's life." She gestured subtly towards Mrs. Kim, who flinched at the implied connection. "A truth that impacts Minjun, your nephew, not your son." The word nephew hung in the air, a bell tolling the end of an era. Mr. Kim's face contorted, a vein throbbing visibly in his temple. He looked from Eleanor to his mother, his eyes finally settling on Mrs. Kim with a look of profound betrayal. "Mother, what is she talking about?" The question was raw, laced with disbelief and a deep-seated hurt that was only just beginning to surface. Mrs. Kim, still weeping, slowly lifted her head, She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came, only a choked sob. Eleanor knew she needed a push, a gentle but firm catalyst. Mrs. Kim, Eleanor said, her voice softer now, her eyes conveying both understanding and urgency. He needs to hear it from you, all of it. The truth about Sora, about your father's choices, about the life you both have lived under this shadow. It's time to bridge this chasm. Mister. Kim watched his mother, his expression a complex mixture of anger, fear, and a nascent, desperate hope for an explanation. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken decades. The air crackled with the raw energy of a dam about to burst. Finally, Mrs. Kim took a shuddering breath. Her voice, when it came, was reedy and fragile, yet held the weight of a monumental confession. Your, your mother and my sister, Hannah, Sora, she, she ran away from the forced marriage. She was pregnant with your father's child, but not your father's child, my son. The words were halting, fractured, but they were a beginning. Each syllable chipped away at the edifice of lies. Mr. Kim recoiled as if struck. The revelation, delivered in such a broken, hesitant manner, was more devastating than any furious accusation. The carefully constructed world of his identity crumbled around him. He stared at his mother, then back at Eleanor, then at his mother again, his mind struggling to reconcile the impossible. Eleanor stepped back, giving them space, but her presence remained a grounding force. The first, most painful threads of conversation had been woven. It was clumsy, fraught, and agonizing, but it was a beginning. The bridge of maternal wisdom, extended by Eleanor, had finally connected two souls long, estranged by silence and deceit. The discomfort in the room was palpable, but so too was the undeniable current of something new, something honest, struggling to be born. The search for Sora. The lullaby, a delicate skein woven from memory and sorrow, shimmered in the air, no longer a melody, but a visible, poignant presence. It was a tangible echo of lost love, a past so deeply entombed it had nearly choked the present. Mr. Kim remained transfixed, his face a canvas of colliding emotions, disbelief, betrayal, and a dawning terrible clarity. The bombshell, Sora, his mother, alive and somewhere out there, fractured the very bedrock of his identity. The world, constructed on the unshakable premise of his mother's ghost, dissolved around him. A profound, shuddering gasp escaped, raw with pain and a burgeoning hope. My mother. The words were a mere wisp, a question aimed not at Mrs. Kim, but at the gaping chasm in his own history. He turned to Eleanor, his usually guarded eyes now exposed, vulnerable. She fled? With me? Eleanor met his gaze, her own steady and compassionate. Yes, Mr. Kim. From what Mrs. Kim shared, she ran to shield you both. She defied a life that was imposed, not chosen. Mrs. Kim, shoulders hunched, finally lifted her head, her gaze flitting between her son and Eleanor. Her voice rasped, heavy with the decades of unspoken guilt. My father, he was a tyrant. He sought to merge our families, to consolidate his power. Sora, she was destined for your uncle, Minjun's father, but she refused. She loved someone else. When she became pregnant, he disowned her. He declared her dead to the world. He made me promise never to utter her name again. A solitary tear carved a glistening path down her cheek, a river in the dry landscape of her grief. Young Ho, a silent sentinel whose presence had been almost imperceptible, stirred. A faint tremor ran through his hand, a mute plea for Mrs. Kim to temper her intensity. He had watched the drama unfold, his own face a carefully controlled mask of shock. Mr. Kim's jaw tightened, not from anger, but from a profound, aching sorrow. He envisioned a young woman, defiant and desperate, fleeing a formidable patriarch, a secret life blossoming within her. He saw not a ghost, but a courageous mother. The image of Minjun, his nephew, clicked into place, not as a burden, but as a living bridge to this vibrant, indomitable woman. A new purpose, sharp and undeniable, began to solidify within him. We need to find her, he stated, his voice gaining strength. resolve hardening his features. My mother, we need to find Sora. Mrs. Kim flinched as if physically struck. After all these years, it's impossible, young ho. She could be anywhere. She could be. She trailed off, the unspoken specter of death hanging heavy. Eleanor stepped forward, her calm demeanor a balm in the rolling storm. Mrs. Kim, with all due respect, nothing is impossible when there's a will to find someone, especially when there's love. Her gaze swept between Mr. Kim and Mrs. Kim. Sora, she left a piece of herself behind. The lullaby. It's a powerful connection. It suggests she clung to her past, to her heritage, even as she forged a new existence. Mr. Kim turned to Eleanor, a nascent hope flickering in his eyes. You knew her, didn't you? As Sora, as Hannah. Eleanor nodded. Yes, as Sora. We were children. She taught me that lullaby. She spoke of her family, of her dreams. She was vibrant, spirited. She harbored a deep love for art, for music. She was exceptionally skilled with her hands, always sketching, always crafting small, exquisite things. Eleanor paused, searching her memory. She often spoke of a particular park near a willow tree where she would go to draw, and there was a small community center where she volunteered, teaching children art. A park? A community center? Mr. Kim's mind raced, already assembling the fragments. Do you recall the general area? The city? It was many years ago, Eleanor confessed, a hint of regret in her voice. But I remember it was a coastal town, not far from a major port. She always loved the sea. Mrs. Kim surprisingly found her voice, a flicker of her old intensity returning. A coastal town. A port. Father had contacts in every major port city. He would have checked there first. He would have searched. Perhaps, Eleanor offered gently, but a mother protecting her child can be incredibly resourceful. And if she truly intended to vanish, she would have anticipated his pursuit. She would have sought out a place where she could blend in, where her talents might be appreciated. Mr. Kim looked at Eleanor with profound respect. Her talents, art, music. Do you think she might have continued that path? It was her passion, Mr. Kim, her very identity. It's rare for someone to completely abandon what truly defines them. Eleanor considered for a moment. And the lullaby. It's a regional folk song, quite specific to this part of the country. It's not something she would have easily forgotten or that she would have taught to just anyone unless she felt a profound connection. So we begin with art schools, community centers, small galleries in coastal towns near major ports, mister. Kim articulated, his mind already formulating a plan. And we search for records of a woman, perhaps under a different name, who was skilled in art and music, and perhaps a woman who had a child around the same time. The air in the room, once thick with unspoken secrets, now pulsed with a newfound energy. The weight of the past remained, but it was now a burden they were actively lifting, together. The search for Sora was not merely a quest for a missing person. It was a journey to reclaim a fractured family, to mend old wounds, and to finally allow a forgotten lullaby to sing its full true song. Young Ho, still silent, now watched Mr. Kim with a subtle shift in his posture, a flicker of approval in his eyes. The boss had a new direction, a vital purpose that transcended the shadowed world of his business. The family, for the first time in decades, was united in a common, hopeful cause. A new home, a new hope. The oppressive silence that had long cloaked the Kim mansion began to dissipate, replaced by the gentle hum of life. Sunlight, once a hesitant intruder, now streamed through the vast windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, no longer a symbol of neglect but of awakening. The heavy drapes, formerly drawn tight, were pulled back, revealing glimpses of a meticulously manicured garden that had seemed almost mythical before. The air, once sharp with the scent of aged wood and forgotten sorrow, now carried faint, sweeter notes, a hint of fresh flowers from the garden, the lingering fragrance of a recently baked treat from the kitchen, and subtly, the clean, comforting scent of baby powder. Minjun, once confined to a nursery that felt more like a pristine museum exhibit, now explored the mansion with burgeoning confidence. His joyful shrieks echoed through hallways that had only known hushed footsteps. He crawled on plush carpets, chasing after a rolling ball, his laughter bright and uninhibited. His once pale cheeks were now plump and rosy, and his eyes, previously wide with apprehension, sparkled with curiosity and delight. He reached for Eleanor with an unreserved trust, pulling at her hair with tiny, determined hands, or patting her face with a soft, open palm. Mrs. Kim, her face softer now, a faint network of fine lines around her eyes, the only testament to her past struggles, would often sit on the floor with Minjun, guiding his hands to stack colorful blocks or letting him tug at her silk scarf. Her expressions were no longer guarded. Instead, a serene smile often played on her lips as she watched her grandson. Mr. Kim, who had initially held Minjun with an almost clumsy reverence, now cradled him with natural ease, bouncing him gently, eliciting giggles that filled the space with warmth. Young Ho, always a silent fixture, often found himself watching the unfolding scene from a respectful distance. A slight, almost imperceptible nod of approval would sometimes grace his stern features as he observed Mr. Kim's transformation, a silent acknowledgement of this shift in the family's dynamic. Eleanor, witnessing this profound change, felt a deep sense of peace settle within her. The mansion, which had initially felt like a gilded cage, now embraced her as a sanctuary. She moved through its grand rooms with a confident stride, her presence a catalyst for its burgeoning warmth. Her days were filled with a purpose that transcended mere employment. She was not just Minjin's caregiver, she was a conduit for healing, a quiet anchor in a storm that had finally begun to recede. One afternoon, as Minjin napped soundly in his crib, Eleanor sat in the sun drenched conservatory, a rare book of Korean poetry open on her lap, though her gaze was fixed on the vibrant orchids that bloomed in profusion. She thought about the lullaby, the simple melody that had unraveled decades of hidden pain. It was a tune that now resonated with a different kind of power, not one of shock or sorrow, but of hope and connection. She had arrived at the Kim estate a compassionate outsider, an observer of a deeply guarded existence. Now she felt inextricably woven into the fabric of their lives, a thread of unexpected strength and empathy. The revelation of Sora's survival had ignited a new fervor in Mr. Kim, a determination that had replaced his previous quiet stoicism. He immersed himself in the stories Eleanor shared about Sora, about her love for art, her vibrant spirit, her defiant courage. Eleanor found herself recounting tales of their shared childhood, painting a vivid picture of the girl she knew as Sora, a girl who blossomed under the sun, whose laughter was infectious, and whose spirit refused to be tamed. Each memory shared was a brushstroke, adding to the portrait of a woman Mr. Kim was now desperate to find. She loved to sketch, Eleanor recalled one evening, her voice soft with remembrance. Trees, flowers, even the way the light fell on a simple stone. She saw beauty everywhere, even in the most ordinary things. Mr. Kim listened intently, his eyes reflecting a newfound understanding, a longing to reconcile the mother he thought he knew with the vibrant artist Eleanor described. He pored over old maps, contacted obscure art galleries, and delved into archives, driven by a powerful yearning to bridge the chasm of lost years. Mrs. Kim, though still wrestling with her own complex emotions surrounding Hannah, offered quiet support, sharing fragmented memories of her sister's early life, adding more pieces to the mosaic of Sora's past. The search was not just for Sora, it was a journey of self discovery for the entire family. Mr. Kim was learning about his mother not through the filtered lens of his father's rigid narratives, but through the vibrant memories of her childhood friend. Mrs. Kim was confronting her own grief and the guilt of a secret held too long, finding solace in the hope of her sister's return. Minjun, blissfully unaware of the intricate tapestry of his family's past, continued to thrive, his very existence a testament to the enduring power of love and connection. Eleanor, watching them, understood that her initial purpose, to care for a lonely infant, had evolved into something far grander. She had become an unwitting architect of their reconciliation, a quiet catalyst for a truth that had been buried for too long. The lullaby, a melody of comfort and sorrow, had now become an anthem of hope, echoing through the revitalized halls of the Kim mansion, promising a future built on honesty, understanding, and the possibility of a family reunited. The journey ahead was uncertain, fraught with potential challenges, but the mansion, once a cold fortress, now pulsed with a nascent warmth, a home ready to embrace a new beginning. Eleanor felt a profound sense of gratitude. She had found not just a job, but a purpose, a family, and a home. The quiet strength she possessed had found its true calling, helping to mend broken ties and illuminate forgotten truths. The Kim family, once shrouded in the shadows of a painful past, was now stepping into the light, guided by the simple, powerful melody of a mother's love.